All right, end of day 3, Brigade Congress. Thank you all so much for sticking it out with us and for being here for this conversation. One that I am particularly pumped for. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Meredith Horowski. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the Senior Director of the network at Code for America. And I am one of your speakers today. I like the term facilitator because this will be a participatory conversation because we want your ideas related to what advocacy and politics looks like within our network. This topic is pretty near and dear to my heart. I've spent most of my career doing things related to organizing and advocacy at various different levels. Kind of got my start doing advocacy work in college. One of my closest friends is trans, and at the time there was no gender neutral housing, no gender neutral bathrooms. So we started trying to change that. I sort of started doing advocacy work and campaign work before I really realized that's what it was. I didn't even know that the terminology related to this. I just sort of with my friends saw a problem that we thought was unfair, unjust, and wanted to do something about. And that sort of led me into a career in trying to change policy, politics, systems, and using the tools that we have at our disposal to try and do that. And I am joined in this conversation by Kelli Shewmaker, who is the outreach lead for Code for DC, as well as Thad Karofsky, who's brigade leader for Code for Boston, as well as one of our amazing NAC members, and also Janet Michaelis, who is a brigade leader for Code for Dayton, as well as an amazing member of our NAC. Janet refers to herself as sort of the backstage crew, so as responsible for a lot of the content you see in this presentation. So thank you, Janet. Thad or Kelli, anything you want to say right off the bat in terms of what this topic means to you?
I'll get into it more in a bit, but it's been a true pleasure collaborating with Congressman Moulton's office in Boston and learning more about advocacy and how we can do it at Brigade. So yeah, Kelli?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this session really started as a conversation that we were having just as friends, and kind of grew and led into having this session here today. So I just wanted um, to tell everybody where I'm coming from is that this is something that I'm interested in, and I'm really sorry, I got a message. It's hard to hear me. Is that better? Um, okay. Uh, my experience with advocacy, kind of like Meredith was talking about, um, I got involved on a different issue and didn't really know anything about any of this, and just got involved because it was something that I cared about. And so living in DC, I got involved in DC statehood advocacy. And so I've been on the Hill. you know, you may or may not know that DC doesn't have Congress people. We don't have representatives or senators. And so I've been on the Hill for the last, I don't know, 8 years or so, advocating with all of your representatives for DC statehood. And so that's how I learned about all of this. Um, and so I'm coming to my role as a brigade member, interested in what you all are interested in, and thinking about what we all can do as a network to influence policy. I thought it was really interesting in the opening keynote today. The speaker talked about federal policy for broadband. And so that's just an example of something that I think that we all as a network have an opportunity to influence policy on a national level if that's something that we're interested in doing. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Thanks so much, Kelli. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about in this meeting. I always like to know where we're kind of headed. So we're going to spend just a few minutes, not too long, at that sort of 30,000 foot level of what do politics and advocacy have to do with civic tech? What is our role in all of this? Ground ourselves in some common understanding of what do we mean by advocacy? What are the tools of advocacy? And we're going to talk about where is this already showing up in the network. So we'll offer a few examples and then do sort of a deep dive with Code for Boston on how they've been doing advocacy at different levels within their brigade. And then we're going to open it up to some conversation and use a fun retro tool to get this group's thoughts on where do we want to go with advocacy in 2021. Frankly, I'm developing, and with the help of many people, our strategy for 2021. And I want this conversation to inform what I put in sort of our request to the organization and what I outline for what we want to focus on in the coming year. And I have a hope, potentially based on how this discussion goes, that we want to do more advocacy in 2021 and that we need some resources to be able to do that. So there's going to be a opportunity for us to kind of carve out what that looks like during this session. All right. Let's see if this will play. Politics. Do we really have to? Do we have to talk about politics? Oh no. Wonder how I can make this play without advancing to the next slide. Here we go.
I have a lot to say about politics. Some people don't want to talk about politics. They're like, NATO, why do you got to talk about politics? What do politics have to do with me? I'm not an immigrant or a black person or a Muslim or a Jew or a gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or a woman or an old person or a young person or a student or a union member or artist or journalist or scientist or public employee. I don't breathe the air or drink the water. I don't live in a coastal region that'll be affected by sea level rise or an arid region that'll be affected by drought or fire. I don't like chocolate, wine, or coffee or other commodities that will no longer be available due to climate change. I'm not mentally ill, pregnant, disabled, or currently being shot at, so what do politics have to do with me? That's a fair point. It's hard to argue with that.
So politics is everything. Someone who firmly believes that pretty much everything in our lives is influenced by politics, and certainly civic tech is not immune from that. And I think this shows up a little bit differently for all of us based on who we are, our identities, our perspectives, what we're involved with. So would like to start with some thoughts from this group about how politics and policy shows up in civic tech. So I'm going to exit sort of the formal screen share version, and let's just popcorn some thoughts from all of you about how politics and policy shows up for you in civic technology. And I'm going to note them down here.
I can kick it off by saying, one of the big things that has been like played a big role in Code for DC has been our local open data policy.
Awesome. Great example.
I wasn't sure how the slide was going to be run, but I did add the universal first mean tested, which I heard in our keynote today.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thanks, Thad. How else do policy and politics show up in civic tech for all of you?
I was going to say there are a couple things, both in the things I've been doing with the brigade and also in my day job working with high school students who are learning computer science, that one of the things that I've seen that politics and policy have really impacted, of course, is access to technology, being able to have access to broadband, which also came up this morning. And, just that the digital gap, which is a real thing. And then, of course, also, and this is maybe jumping a little ahead to what you're going to talk about with the 1,000-foot view, but just last month, the mayor and council in Tucson declared a climate emergency, which means they're now planning to take a lot of actions to be able to deal with what we already know is what we can already see happening in Tucson. And so I'm focusing a lot of my efforts towards projects that support that as well. And so, yeah, it's very much supporting the policies that are ongoing in the city.
I'd like to piggyback on Dan. Dan, you must have read my mind because you touched on a point that I wanted to make, and it's going to be a bit redundant, Meredith, so you won't have to type it. In the project that I'm working with, we see a need for technology. We see a need for more robust, I think they're called Obama phones. ones that can, take pictures and ones that also can effectively take them in a clear manner. So whatever we can do to reach those, the people that make the agreements with the manufacturers as well as the carriers, I think would be effective there.
I think something I'd like to add on the topic of like social safety net programs, something that came up was recognizing when the difference can be merely administrative obstacles that have arisen out of decades of like adding to red tape versus potentially for some states intentional obstacles, which are designed to reduce the number of applicants receiving those services.
So, hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good, because I put in headphones to make sure I could hear all of you. So I'm not saying this on behalf of Beta NYC because I am just a New York City resident who goes to some of their things, but at least here in New York City, there's a lot of confusion between what level of government is it? Is it city? Is it state? Is it federal? So for instance, I volunteered to be a poll worker, and there were people in the training a few days ago in the Javits Center who didn't even know that voting is regulated on a state by state level. They thought it was federal, which it's not, and so I'm not trying to make it political, but I'm saying like people can exhaust themselves just trying to figure out what level. And also, even if you get the level, like for instance, I do UX design and research and strategy professionally, and I do, unfortunately, civic design only on my evenings and weekends. I would love to be paid to do civic design, but even, like the mayor's office of New York City has like 20 mayor's offices of, and I'm sure I know some people in some of them and they're doing great. And I met them all just before COVID. So they're all like scrambling and working from home. But the point is it's so hard to pinpoint sometimes who or what organization, like, is it the city council? Is it the borough president? Is it the state level? Is it your state representative? Like, there's so many levels that I think I spend like half my time before I speak to someone for any sort of like, evening, weekend thing, just trying to figure out who the right person is to speak to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I see Yeti's had her hand up for a while. I don't know if that is accurate.
Yeah, go ahead, Yeti.
Oh, sorry, I don't know if you can hear me, but I think politics is at the core of civic tech work. And I don't think that we can question when it comes down to helping communities, especially communities that we feel benefit from some of our program areas, because they would look to government and policies to help assist with those areas of needs for communities. And I could talk about a work I did this past few week, and it's with regards to education and education on schools getting funding, federal funding, as it relates to whether they're going to be open or not, which some schools have chosen not to do because of fear of safety for teachers and students. But it's all about policy. It's all about, the pressure on schools and administrators to open the school, because if they don't get state funding. And, you see this conversation from various angles, right? I'm a parent and I have my child in the public school system. So I'm advocating on behalf of parents who feel that it's necessary to put students and their teachers first. But then you have schools who need to operate and needs the funding for next year or are affected by certain policies. So there's all kinds of, I feel like it all ties up to this idea of affecting policy and reform in a way that it makes a difference for the kind of work we do in our communities. And I just don't see even a question there. I feel like it's very much connected.
Can I add in privacy policies also?
Absolutely. That's a great example. These are all fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to sort of presentation view so we can move on a little bit with some of the conversation about.
Can I just ask, when you wrote PNP, do you mean policy and participation?
Policy and politics. Yeah.
Oh, policy and politics. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And Jacqueline, to your point, a lot of this can be super confusing. Like, at what level of government can we influence? Do we want to influence? Where can we have the most impact? What are the tools and tactics for influence at different levels? So that's some of what we're going to get into here, but some of what I think we'd love all of your perspective on is, where can we have the most influence? Are there certain issue areas? Are there certain levels of government that we say, actually, that's not where we as a Brigade network can have the most influence, and we want to focus in these other places? So I think that's something we should keep top of mind as well in this conversation. It's one of my favorite quotes from Howard Zinn: "You can't be neutral on a moving train." And I think the role that policy and politics plays in our world, in our lives, in the work we do, including in civic tech, is kind of demonstrative of this. I also like the saying that to be apolitical is a political act. So you don't have an option not to make a choice, or that choice will be made for you. So you can't be neutral, and I think we've got to decide what that means for us to not be neutral. All right, and one of the ways, of course, that we influence policy and politics is through advocacy. So advocacy is a specific set of strategies and tactics that you can use to influence policy and politics. So I'm going to hand this off to Kelli to ground us in some shared terminology definitions related to advocacy.
Okay, so some of this stuff, I realize everybody is coming from different places, and so some of this stuff may be obvious. Some of you are coming from places where you got a really good education on civics. Others of us like slept through civics in high school. So for me, a lot of this was really new. It was like, yeah, I probably knew that, but it was not really clear. So I just want to kind of apologize up front if this is really basic for some of you. But it's been a process for me to learn about all of this. So I just want to hit a couple things really quickly. And also, I want to say a disclaimer too, because when you talk about us as brigades being nonprofit organizations or being part of Code for America as a nonprofit organization, you really get into some legal issues. And so if you don't already know this, there's a difference between advocacy and lobbying, and you have to be really careful about not being partisan. And so as a nonprofit organization, and some of it depends on your particular nonprofit status. And so the disclaimer is that this is not legal advice, and you need to talk to your attorneys. Whoever set up your nonprofit organization, whoever did the legal work is probably an attorney and can advise you on what your organization can and can't do. But basically, any nonprofit organization you talk to is going to tell you you can't support candidates. You can't support partisan candidates, but you can support policies. We can advocate for legislation. So anyway, that's if you don't know about those kinds of things, those are things that you need to talk to somebody locally about and get official legal advice on. But, I just wanted to say, when we do advocacy on the Hill, we go and meet with senators and representatives in the House of Representatives, which people call Congress people, even though senators technically are Congress people too. Nobody says that. But then there are staffers in those Congress people's offices, and most of the time if you call or go in person, you're going to talk to a staffer. Usually a legislative director is the person that you would be meeting with, and you'll probably, when you first call, talk to a scheduler about getting an appointment. These are some of the things that we were having conversations with Thad and Janet and me, um, and they thought that people in our brigade network may not know about some of this, like the actual process of getting to meet with your Congress people and talking to them about policy and legislation. So I don't want to get like too far down a rabbit hole, but if anybody is interested in talking about that, I think any of us are available to talk about it more. And also, if you need help finding somebody locally, they're everywhere you go. There are gonna be nonprofit organizations and consultants and experts who can advise you locally about the best way to do advocacy in your jurisdictions at all of those levels that we were just talking about a few minutes ago.
Yep. Thanks for that, Kelly. A good reminder for us to think about what the guardrails are for 501c3 organizations, which is something Code for America can help you with as well. So I think also important to keep in mind as we think about big systems of politics and Congress and different levels of government is that government is in fact people. And people can be influenced, and that is where advocacy comes in. And people often take, of course, very different positions on different things. So, keeping with our Code for Pawnee and Parks and Rec's theme, here is one such perspective that you might encounter. I think all government is a waste of taxpayer money. My dream is to have the park system privatized and run entirely by and for corporations like Chuck E. Cheese. They have an impeccable business model. Sidebar, Chuck E. Cheese update. Chuck E. Cheese has now more or less gone under and declared bankruptcy. So there may be people that we are trying to influence that we disagree with, and we may have good reason to do so, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be influenced if we apply the right set of tools and tactics for them. So what are some of those tools and tactics? There's a whole host of different things you can do when you're working to advocate or pressure different decision makers. So we've laid out like kind of a spectrum here that outlines what some of these tactics are and the scale at which you need to mobilize around these tactics in order to influence. Tweeting at elected leaders. So senators, your state legislators, your city council, tweeting at them and getting a bunch of people to do that called the tweet storm on social media. Sending emails to decision makers. Faxes, believe it or not, a lot of offices still have faxes and can be a sort of fun and powerful way to get their attention if you're flooding their fax machine with messages about a certain topic. And then of course, calls to decision makers. Calling their offices, both if it's at the federal level, offices in DC, as well as their congressional offices in districts. And of course, this is even more impactful at a smaller scale with state legislators, with city councilors as well, when you're jamming people's voicemails with calls to Congress. Letters to the editor. Elected leaders of all types read their local newspapers. So if they're seeing an issue come up over and over again in those papers, it's something they're likely to pay attention to. And on the left-hand side of the spectrum, you need like hundreds of thousands, maybe thousands, depending on the level of government you're trying to influence. And then as you go across to the right, you need sort of fewer of these actions in order to influence. And we have not yet covered I also like this quote. This one's from Janet. She added in here, these people are members of the community that care about where they live. So what I hear when I'm being yelled at is people caring loudly at me. So remember, using your voice is a mechanism to advocate on behalf of yourself and your community. And it is sort of part of our role, responsibility, privilege as part of a democracy to be able to use channels to advocate to different decision makers. And we see this sort of caring loudly happening already within the network. So we have a letter to the editor action right now, actually, in partnership with an organization called National Expungement Week. We've invited brigades and target states to write letters to the editor on behalf of automatic record clearance. So if that's something you'd like to do, we'd love to support you in doing that. Last year, we also decided as a network that we wanted to kind of for the first time do a coordinated advocacy campaign to do emails to senators on behalf of the Digital Service Act, trying to get different digital service teams in states across the country. And we have not yet discussed what is the #1 most effective advocacy tactic sort of in our tool belt. What's all of your perspective on what falls in this category? Jacqueline, I see your hand up.
So I would say two things. One is like an emotional appeal Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's necessarily good, but it's true. And another thing is whether or not, like, basically follow the money. You know, are you able to get behind something that's funded, or are you volunteering your time in exchange for doing something? But I would just say emotions and follow the money.
Yep.
And know which level of government you should even be doing that at.
Yep. I think you've hit on a couple important points here, which is the message, like the message that's embedded in the advocacy that you're communicating. Tapping into values, emotions, anecdotes can be incredibly powerful, as well as sort of alluded to the stakeholder mapping. Like, what are the levers of influence that the person you're trying to get to change their mind on something? What are those levers for them? And money is certainly a really influential one. What about in terms of like the actual tactic, like the method of communication for advocacy that is regarded as sort of the #1 most effective way to influence decision makers?
I'll jump in here because you've actually mentioned it a few times, but you can't underestimate the power of actually sitting down and talking with whoever it is you're advocating with. A little harder right now, granted, but yeah, if you can go talk to the mayor, the city council member, whatever person that is that you're advocating some action from, that's more effective than just about anything else you can do.
Nailed it. Absolutely. That combined with what Jacqueline mentioned around a powerful message and being able to bring with you some analysis of what influences that stakeholder and where their interests are is incredibly powerful. So direct lobby meetings through one-to-one meetings and influence with elected officials and or their staff. Their staff are actually incredibly important in influencing policy and making change. So be in the room where it happens, develop relationships. Another Parks and Rec one here. Dear Congress, it's Leslie again. If the person you're trying to influence knows you by name, you know that you're on the right track to being able to make change. And so this is also happening within the network. We have a hypothesis that we need to be building more relationships with partners at every level of government, even before there is an ask to be made. And I want to highlight for you a couple places where this is showing up, and this will be my handoff to Thad to talk more about this, how this is happening at Code for Boston. So M. Burnett, who is one of the leaders of this year's Brigade Congress, as well as leader of Open Maine, has built a ton of relationships locally in Portland, sort of regarded as a new face of Portland politics. And that has afforded them the opportunity to sit on different working groups related to technology and its intersection with the social safety net. They're often consulted on how tech should show up in legislation that the state legislator is proposing. And Code for Boston is doing this exceptionally well as well. So I am going to hand it off to Thad to tell us a little bit more about how that's working.
Thanks, Meredith. And looks like we're at 35, so I will try to go pretty snappy with this so we have room for everyone's input. But I just wanted to reflect a little bit on the project that was just mentioned in the last slide, the Windfall Awareness Project. Basically, this is how Code for Boston has become involved with all these things, and it's exactly what you all were just saying. When you're in the room with the people making these decisions, it all goes so much more easily. And so I have kind of identified these 3 different kind of ways that it's important. It's good to think about at least federal impact, and there's probably some ways to translate this down to other offices, but this has been my experience. So if you start from the right, the caseworkers at the district office of Congressman Seth Moulton in Massachusetts, in Salem, Massachusetts, came into our hack night at some point late in 2018 and pitched us a project that was based on some of their casework with 300 or so of their constituents. And this was just an amazing serendipitous situation that probably won't happen again for any length of time, but it really introduced us to what this could be like and how other brigades could work. And I still firmly believe that the district office is really the place where brigades have the most potential to collaborate. The next slide, please. The one thing to note about district offices is they aren't all resourced. Some Congress people do not really use their district office. They're mostly focused on legislation. And that sounds like something we could maybe influence, but also it might also affect sort of if you have 5 Congress people around your brigade, maybe you would choose one of the 5 based on one of them that does use their district office more and work on more on casework rather than legislation. This is right up front. Go ahead. So if you want to get involved now, there's these 2 channels on the Slack for the Code for America Slack. On the district office side with your brigade, we're trying to use the Congress Meets Code. And on the Capitol Hill side, we're trying to use the policy politics. And I put in 3 projects that fit into each of these categories. And we worked from B to C, and maybe someday soon we will get to A. So the order is a little bit not exactly consistent, but so the Windfall project that I was just talking about that we've been doing for the last few years supports existing casework at under-resourced district offices in, like I said, Salem, Massachusetts, to work on this one policy that really causes a lot of trouble for constituents that are retiring, especially school teachers and firefighters. So this kind of alleviated some pressure that they were feeling and is a clear win for their constituents. And that led to this later collaboration with Ananda at the DC office on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, which allowed us to, can you go back to the slide with a picture of us on Capitol Hill, Meredith, please? Back 3 slides, 4 slides, yeah. There you go. So that led to our event on the Hill that Meredith put a picture here in early March. And now we can go back to the other ones. And so it just shows how these relationships build on each other. And finally, maybe someday, brigades that are near the representatives that are working on tech issues, like the Select Committee for Modernization. This chair of that committee was in Washington, and the co-chair was in Georgia, and right near Atlanta, actually. So these are 3 really clear examples of how we can already do pretty much what we need to do using these 2 channels for coordination. Next slide, please. And then finally, the bridging points between these have even more exciting possibilities to build relationships on the left, and then to help policy be more user-centered on the bottom. And so I would love to chat with you about any of these if you have questions, but definitely join those 2 channels, Congress Meets Code to help for connecting with the district office, and policy politics for help connecting on the national Capitol Hill side. Thank you.
Oops, muted. Thank you so much, Thad. Really appreciate and admire all the work that Code for Boston is doing on so many fronts related to advocacy, politics, relationship building with those in which we can partner with to have influence. So from here, we want to get all of your perspectives on what we should do more of on this topic in 2021 and beyond. So we are going to structure the conversation through a fun retro. So I'll drop the link here to that in the chat shortly. And we're going to frame this around 3 primary questions. So in 2021, we want to do more advocacy political work on blank. We want your thoughts. So we're going to brainstorm there. Second framing question is the challenges to doing this work, some of which I saw just raised in the chat are, we want your thoughts on what are the barriers for us. Then we want to know, what do we need to be able to meet these challenges? What are we going to do? What resources do we need? So these are going to be the framing questions for our discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and grab the link to the fun retro and add it here. Make sure you're all able to access this. Does anyone have any questions while I am getting this link dropped in here? Questions about what we're doing or what's been shared so far?
I did put the link in.
Oh, thanks so much, Kelly.
Oh.
So my immediate question is, what's the scope? Because that is key.
I would say that in terms of like what we want to do advocacy on in 2021, um, I'm going to propose that we keep this like anything fair game. So both local issues, state level issues, as well as federal issues. So some of the ones that were brought up already in the initial brainstorm, we talked about open data policy. If you want to see your brigade or the network do more on open data policy in 2021, or Dan bringing up climate change, if we can do projects and advocacy related to climate change locally, those are great examples. Everybody comfortable with us sort of keeping this broad for now? To feel free to offer things at both local, state, and federal level. Okay. Is everybody in the fun retro? Give me like a thumbs up if you're good so far. Okay, excellent. So then let me just do a really quick demo of how this is going to work. I see some of you are in here already. That's awesome. So the way you participate in this fun retro is to click this little plus button, and that allows you to add a card. And I can say, we should advocate for, I don't know, brigades winning the lottery. So you can add cards to any of these 3 columns. So column 1 is ideas for what we want to do in 2021. Column 2 is barriers and challenges, and then resources needed, and how we're going to overcome those challenges is number 3. So for now, we're just going to add cards. And so we're going to take about 5 or 6 minutes to do that. And then we're going to vote so we can see where there's some energy. To be clear, voting, we're not making any final decisions on this at the moment, but we do want to see where there's some collective energy for us to focus in 2021. All right, with that, any clarifying questions before we take about 5 minutes to add some cards in here? Okay, let's do it. Don't hesitate to pop on the mic or in the chat if you have anything that comes up. Okay, so for those of you who have added cards, and if you still have more to add, feel free to go ahead and do so. We're going to take about 3 minutes to vote on these. And again, voting for the purpose of this exercise is mostly an expression of where there seems to be some collective energy. We're not necessarily making final decisions that we're going to do this or not do this in 2021. And you should have, there's a lot of cards here. This is awesome. I'm going to up the number of votes you get. I'm going to give you 15 votes to spread across all 3 columns. If you really care about one in particular, feel free to vote on that more than once, and you vote by hitting that little thumbs up button on each card. So I'm going to hide the vote counts at first for the purposes of making this as sort of fair as possible. Normally, if we had more time, we would like combine similar cards so that you're not spreading votes out across kind of the same ideas. But hopefully, because you have so many votes, you should be able to capture where you have enthusiasm for different cards. And on the back end, we can combine similar ones and combine the votes accordingly as well. Any clarifying questions about the voting process?
Should we merge cards if we see some that are the same thing?
If you see them, go ahead and you can merge them by just dragging and dropping it onto the other similar card.
Yeah, Meredith, I just wanted to check. We have 15 total votes to spread across all 3 categories.
That's true. Yeah, normally how you spread out votes, the rule of thumb is to take n divided by 3. Does anyone want to like quickly try and count how many total cards we have?
I'm sorry, I went on a really brief bathroom break, and I think I may have already done some voting while I was entering in things, but you're saying we just have 15 votes and apply them across all the cards? Because I think some of the cards overlap.
Yeah, don't worry about that too much right now. We can, on the back end, combine similar ones and combine the votes accordingly. So hopefully we'll give you enough votes where you can click on where you have some enthusiasm. I think hopefully someone for me is actually counting the total number of cards we have, and we might up the number from 15 if we need to. Dan, I see you chuckling. You're muted though. Do you have anything you want to add? Okay. Well,
Yeah, I was going to say I was trying to count them, but then they all shuffled and I lost my count. So,
fair
but
enough.
there's a bunch of them.
Okay. So I'm gonna, just to be safe, I'm gonna give y'all 20 votes. So hopefully that's plenty for you to vote. So let's take about 3-ish minutes, see how far we get on voting. If you've already done some voting, that's okay. Just keep going. Use up your votes if you'd like. You also don't have to use all your votes if you don't want to.
Meredith, I have a quick question for you.
I will do my best.
Okay, great. Does Code for America have, I know you have community partners. Do you have like partners, like I'll just throw out a couple names, a Salesforce.com or an Apple that also partner with you on different initiatives?
Yeah, we get in-kind support. Is Tom still on the call? He's our in-kind expert from, there he is, Tom.
Mhm.
Take that one.
You can summon me. We have, so we have various corporate partners. They usually sponsor us with money, but we have in the past also received in-kind, like engineering contributions from some large tech companies. I think that is usually not as easy for us to manage, but I don't know kind of the.
Yeah, so the context of this would be like, for an instance, the Obama phone or any sort of device that's being provided, you know, for people to get, say, SNAP or, you know, benefits. So having more focus on that phone and having it have better functionality so that the community can leverage the technology that we're building. You know, and going hand in hand with larger corporations with bigger names that can put more attention on it.
Interesting. Yeah. We haven't done anything with Obama phones at CFA, though I think it's a huge opportunity because of how important they've been for closing the digital divide. So yeah, I don't know what that looks like, but that's certainly a promising area, I think.
Yeah, and going deeper into, like, you know, Get Cal Fresh, and now you're out to Michigan and we'll be out to other states. I think it'll be critical for those projects, as well as, like, you know, get your refund. And I'll leave it at that and close space.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate that. It's a great idea. I'm going to assume people need probably another 60 seconds or so to finish up their voting. Is that right? Give me a thumbs up or a nod if you need a little bit more time. Okay.
So I used all my votes. I'm just curious, can we as participants have access to this document afterwards? Because I love it and I don't want to like try to memorize it all because I know I will fail.
Absolutely. But you mean the fun retro or the slides themselves?
Well, I meant the fun retro. I assume the slides were going to be included based on like how today has gone with notes and stuff.
Absolutely can still use this session. Or this.
I love this fun retro thing.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yes, definitely we'll still have access to this. And I'd like to shortly uncover the results of the votes. So I'm going to give, anybody still voting? Give me a signal if you need more time. Dan's still voting. Okay. So let's take
still voting.
Awesome. Take about another 30, 45 seconds, finish up your voting, and then we'll reveal results.
Maybe you can sort it in the top left by votes.
So I'm not sure who it was who said the thing about industry partners, but I second that, because as an individual, I know that I have reached at city and state levels, people, you know, just shooting things down, saying like, well, there's no funding for that, et cetera, et cetera. So if we could say something like, well, Apple or Microsoft or Google is interested with us because of X, I think it would get a lot more traction.
Yes, I think even just like a coalition of larger players like that could be really interesting, you know, press releases and activities in and around that to amplify Code for America, as well as whatever initiatives that we're supporting.
I don't know who I'm agreeing with, but I agree with you completely.
This is Kelli. I'll change my name on my Zoom.
All right, we have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead and facilitator privilege jump in here and reveal where we're at. So I'm sharing my screen. You can also, of course, look at this yourself. If you want to sort it for yourself, you can go here to the upper left and go sort by votes. So it looks like we've got a ton of enthusiasm in 2021 to do more around internet access, web accessibility. 21 votes for that. Tech giant regulation, love this.
Can I just say one note, which is that it's interesting that some people put multiple things together. Like I entered each thing separately, but I think the things that have group things will naturally get more votes because they're synergistic. That's all.
Yeah,
I mean, I like them. I'm not liking them. I'm just saying they might affect the voting.
That's a good point. And another reason why this isn't, we want to take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. It's not
right.
too scientific, so we'll want to use this as a starting place for a conversation as opposed to an ending place. But this is definitely shows us where there's some energy. We see some of the biggest barriers as being lack of experience or knowledge in drafting legislation, connecting to decision makers. We see the biggest needs are some resource guides. Some amplification and endorsing from Code for America. Cool.
Can I add something, Meredith?
Yeah, please.
This is Jerry in San Diego. I really want to emphasize that knowing your local government budget cycle and your state legislative cycle, for instance, is really helpful. And if you know when your legislature's in town, you know, on the legislative break, and it's the beginning of California's 2-year legislative cycle, it's a great opportunity to get in there with some other partners and champion things. But you know, a lot of us get kind of our energy in the middle of the summer and then start going after you know, projects or what have you. But the budget's just been approved in June and it just started on July 1st, and so really they don't, you know, like locally here in San Diego, the budget cycle starts around October, and that's when the council members get their little slush fund, you know, list together. And if you can get on that list, you know, you can get funded pretty quickly. And the same with the supervisors. So there's a real issue, and I've been like stammering about this for years, is that just people just don't understand that there's a cycle, and that if we knew those cycles better, we could exploit them better, I think.
Yep. 100%. That's such a critical point of legislative advocacy, particularly at the state and local level. So that's such an important point, Jerry. We are at time. Thank you all for so much engagement and participation in this session. This was fun. I hope it was fun for you, and hope this is the start of a conversation. So join us in the Policy and Politics channel on Slack, as well as Congress Meets Code. Let's do more of this in 2021. And I hope you all join us in the final closing session for Brigade Congress, our chat with our National Advisory Council, as well as our CEO, Amanda. So hope to see you all over there in just a moment. Thank you so much to Kelly, Thad, Janet for your help with this session. And of course, thanks to all of you for all the thoughtful engagement and ideas. Y'all are great. Talk to you soon.